Hello friends and welcome to GameSpot of Thrones, our weekly video show where we talk about everything to do with Essos, Westeros and everything in between. I'm Lucy James, joined this week by Kate Gray.
Hello.
And Dave Jewett.
Howdy.
So we're going to talk about Season 6, Episode 2, Home. And my goodness, do we have a lot to talk about. So consider this your spoiler warning because we're pulling no punches with this episode because a lot of stuff happened. It was awesome. It looks like hype's back on the menu, boys. And girl. Let's kick things off then with a brief recap of last night's episode. Everything seemed to happen in the north. Like the north is where everything went down. So Kate, can you please start us off by talking about everywhere else?
Okay. We'll start off in King's Landing, where Cersei is trapped in her room, moping. Turns out the king has forced her to stay there. She does have the mountain with her, and he's crushing skulls in service of his lady, so that's pretty cool. Jaime is threatening the High Sparrow, but the High Sparrow threatens him right back, brings all his men in. It's very intense. And Tommen finally reunites with his mother, which is sweet.
Help me.
Over in Marine, Tyrion and Varys are bantering like the best of bros, but Tyrion decides it's time to wake the dragons. He goes over to them, he goes, "I'm friends with your mother, please don't eat me." And they seem to accept that, maybe that he can be their friend too. And then he takes their chains off. So the fleet might have been burned, but they still have the most important ship, friendship.
Next time I have an idea like that, punch me in the face.
Over in Bravos, we have Arya training with the waif again. Basically, we only cut to Arya when she's been hit with the stick, so that's nice. She's not very good at fighting, but then Jack and Hagar shows up, finally. And
Or maybe he's
tests her.
been there the whole time.
Maybe he's the waif.
Maybe he's
Maybe.
Syrio for real.
And he says, if a girl says her name, a man will feed her. If a girl says her name, a man will give her eyes back. And we see Arya pause. She's meant to say, a girl is no one or I'm no one. But at that bit, she's like, oh, imagine if I had eyes again. But she does pass the test. She says, I'm no one. And he takes her away, saying, a girl is not a beggar anymore. So that's pretty exciting. What do we think of that?
I'm excited. Also, a girl must become Daredevil.
Yes.
It's basically what's happening.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, Dave, the north, please.
So the episode actually started in the north, where you said most of the interesting things is happening. So Bran is hanging out with his tree friend, the three-eyed raven / crow, depending on whether or not you're a book reader. It seems to change it. And we get to see him have his first major, it's not like flashback, I guess you call it, although it's not his flashback.
Like a green scene,
Yeah,
right?
green scene into the site where he sees young Ned training with Benjen, and we're introduced to Lyanna Stark, putting a face to Ned's sister.
Finally.
Yeah, we've been hearing about her since like episode 1, although she's been dead. But we'll get to see her storyline develop now, hopefully. Then another favourite character turns up, although he's currently got the ability to speak. Hodor?
Yay!
His name's not Hodor, is it?
No.
It's Willis.
You can say it. You can do the line.
What you talk about, Willis?
Because we watched it together and that's all we said for like 10 minutes.
And he's not currently the simple-minded half-giant that he becomes later on in the series. So maybe we'll get to see what happens there. Some tense moments at the wall, where Sir Davos is holed up guarding Jon's body with the loyal men of the Night's Watch. And just when I think we can call them traitors, are just about to knock their way in, old One the Giant comes a knocking.
Yes.
Knocks down the gate of Castle Black. Starts kicking some ass. All the cowards of the Night's Watch just immediately drop their weapons, apart from Alistair Thorne and bloody Ollie.
Thousands of years, the Night's Watchers held Castle Black against the wildlings. Until you.
Some big changes at Winterfell. Ramsay wants to storm Castle Black from the south, having obviously no idea that it's now full of wildlings, and wants to kill Jon before Sansa can get there. As this is going on, as this train of thought has been discussed, Roos's son is born from old Fat Walder. And you can kind of see Ramsay being a bit like, oh dear, I don't know what to think of this. And they have a sweet embrace, and Roose says, you're still my first son. Then he gets stabbed.
Yep.
Shanked.
Ramsay just straight up stabs the fool. And then we get to see what was probably the darkest moment, one of the darkest moments of Game of Thrones.
It ranks. Like, it's top 3.
Spoilers, but Ramsay feeds Fat Walder and her newborn, been alive for about 20 minutes, to his dogs.
She's walking, like, remarkably well for a woman who just gave birth.
Yeah, considering.
Yeah.
That baby was awful blue in the cold. But
That milk of the poppy, though.
Ramsay. He's your brother.
I prefer being an only child.
But then, this is basically the North part too, because so much happened. We saw a nice little reunion scene of Brienne and Sansa kind of admitting, I should have gone with you. And then they, a tearful goodbye to Reek. Because I thought Reek would have gone the whole way, but he decides to go home, back to the island of Pike, which helpfully was the next scene, where we get some Greyjoy action. So the Greyjoy's been missing for a little bit. Balon Greyjoy and Yara they're butting heads a bit because she wants peace and he's like, no, we've lost our foothold on the mainland. We need to get that back. And Yara's like, why can't we just live in peace? We're not good on land. And he says, well, you'll never rule at this rate. Turns out he won't be ruling for much longer either because his brother Euron comes back. The show actually does a really good job of kind of explaining his character in a very short amount of time. Basically, he's got a little bit of the ocean madness. And he just straight up kills his brother and says, you've been king for too long, you've lost it. I am the drowned god. I mean,
He is the storm.
He's the storm, pushes his brother off a bridge, and that kind of instigates a king's moot. They have to decide who their new king will be. So that'll be like the Greyjoy plotline for a little bit. And then we go back to the Wall. And, I mean, this was pretty much the least surprising turn of events ever. I mean, everyone knew. We all knew. Davos reminds Melisandre that she has magical powers because she's like, I probably can't do it. And he's like, well, I've seen you give birth to a shadow baby. And she goes, okay, gives him a bit of a rub down, like an excessively long rub down.
Rub down and a haircut.
Which
Wash
we'd
and dry.
all do in that situation, ladies.
I'd be like, yeah, this is definitely part of the ritual.
And he's back. So our lovely wildling lover is still alive. Yay! Kate, what did you make of, admittedly, the least surprising reveal of all time?
Well, I think it's good that it finally happened. I'm glad that it happened because, there was so much tension, especially in that last episode with the wiping and the hair cutting. And that scene is only there just to make you go, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? After all that, we're thinking it's definitely going to happen. But then it didn't happen. And we were like, oh, God, is this the cruelest trick?
Also, when Ghost opened his eyes first, and we're like, oh, no.
So, yeah, we don't think he's walked into Ghost. And if he has, then, so what? Nothing happened of it. Yeah. So Ghost is happy. Jon is presumably a little happier, having been made alive again.
Yeah. Full of holes, though.
That's true. I mean, for all the people who are dead and have been resurrected, he's not the worst looking.
No.
Yeah. He's a little bit blue. He's got some holes here and there, but we actually see in the preview next week, his back still looks really nice.
And he's had a nice haircut.
He has had a nice haircut. So what do we think is going to happen to Melisandre now that, she's lost her faith, but maybe it'll come back? She's brought Jon Snow back to life. I nearly called him Joe Snow.
Joe Snow. I don't think it's the end we've seen of her. I know it kind of seems like her storyline's petered out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that we saw in the preview for the next week's episode that they think he's a god reborn and Azor Ahai. I'd like to think that she kind of latches onto that. And sort of like her misplaced faith in the Lord of Light, kind of, she rallies around Jon. Because I like her as a character, she's always been just this great staple, I think, of just like mystery in Game of Thrones. So I don't want to see her go.
I mean, I do think they left the room a little bit quickly. Given that she was, doing all this stuff, maybe it takes more than 30 seconds for the ritual to work. Just stick around. And they hadn't left the room for ages up until that point. So why didn't they just stay there for a bit longer? I don't know. But what do we think's going to happen next for our favourite bastard?
Well, now he's, woken up, the wildling's going to be like, oh, hey, man, I remember you. You're that cool guy. And now that we've seen what's happened to Ramsay, and we know what he wants. His objective is to march the wall. So maybe we're going to see some of these characters butt heads finally.
Yeah, it's nice to see different characters in Game of Thrones who haven't, we're in season 6 and they haven't interacted really at all. No. Yeah. It's kind of nice to see sort of just all these threads and paths crossing.
And if anyone's going to put the hurt on Ramsay, it should be Jon.
But I can't wait till he gets over the narrow sea, meets Daenerys so they can marry and have beautiful Targaryen babies.
Ramsay's just like, I don't want to say that he went from 0 to 100 because he's always been at like 70, but he went from like 70 to like 1,000 in this week's episode. He just, like, this is the craziest I think I've ever seen him. I love it. I love Ramsay as a character. I know, Dave, you've got some opinions about Mad Dog Ramsay.
Yeah, so last week we did predict, quite accurately in fact, that he would kill his father based on how much we see of him in the trailer and, you know, Ramsay being mental.
Yeah.
And then we didn't quite realize how he would dispatch his extended family. So
God.
we did think that maybe if Lady Walder did give birth to a son and you would see that as a threat, it could drive him to murder. But he kills his father, stabs him. You know, that's Game of Thrones 101. Everyone gets stabbed.
Yeah.
And then he leads Lady Walder into the kennels under the guise of taking her to roost to show him his new little baby boy.
But, like, she must know the layout of Winterfell. Why would she
I
go
know, but
there?
It's not out of the realms of possibility that she thinks Roose is in the kennels.
Maybe.
Until, you know, he starts opening all the cages. Yeah, it's a bit dark, but... A bit dark.
A baby gets eaten, a newborn baby gets eaten alive by dogs, and you're like, oh, it's a bit dark, isn't it?
I don't know if that was a newborn baby. I think that's a bit of a plot hole that, you know, they go, you've got a son, and then she's just walking around like normal.
Milk of the
Milk of
puppy.
the puppy.
Milk of the
Dressed
puppy.
and whatever.
But as Ramsay said, he prefers to be an only child. And then whistles, sets the hounds on
Release that.
Walder, Lady Walder, and
Yeah.
unnamed small newborn.
What is Ramsay's obsession with dogs?
He is a mad dog.
He's a mad dog.
Dog, no dog.
Doggy dog world.
Exactly.
Dog
The
eat-
dog
dog eat
eat
puppy world.
baby and
Dog eat
fat woman.
humans.
But are we really surprised about Ramsay's actions? Is this the worst he's been? Do we expect him to do any worse?
It's not the worst he's been, but
A newborn baby, literally 20 minutes old.
well, maybe it is. He cut off someone's wiener.
He
right?
killed a baby.
I guess technically that's worse, but he's always
Technically.
been quite cold and calculated in a mad kind of way. And the tension in that moment was just awful. Like, he knew what he was going to do from the minute he saw Lady Walder in the courtyard. He was like, oh, come with me into the kennels. Whoops, wrong place. Oh, no, the dog's escaped. Oh, look, you're dead now.
What's really unsettling is I think, like, he did all of this in front of people.
Yep.
But the fact that the entirety of all of his men, all of his subjects, all of Winterfell are so scared of him, he can do that blatantly in the open,
Yep.
hearing all the screams, seeing his father get stabbed, and nobody even looks twice.
Yeah.
He's
I
got
think
that much fear behind him.
what was so interesting for me is that Roose, I guess, always had this control over him. And it was sort of like ultimately him legitimizing Ramsay, which started his downfall.
Yeah,
like
because he
and
didn't need him anymore.
Yeah, he kept pushing him and he kept saying things like, if you want to be the mad dog, if you want to be a psychopath, your ideas to storm Castle Black is stupid, blah, blah, blah.
You played these games with her, you and your games.
Yeah. And like he knows what his son is like, but I guess something must have blinded him to think that Ramsay would never turn on him. And so when
Yeah.
he did, it was kind of delicious.
Although-
Also, the Starks get payback a little bit.
A little bit. That mad dog line is definitely foreshadowing. If you're going to act like a mad dog, they'll treat you like a mad dog. And I forget the bit after that because I didn't write it down, but something about getting killed, basically.
Unless like it's foreshadowing Ramsay's ultimate end and that the dogs turn on him.
I don't know if it's going to be dogs. I think that would be nice, but they're too well trained.
What if Ghost kills him?
Ooh, that'd be nice.
One-on-one with Jon Snow, and then Ghost just goes for the jugular.
I actually, yeah,
That'd
I'm
be
up
good.
for that.
I want to take a brief moment to say welcome back to the Greyjoys. They have been absent for quite some time, and they do play a big role in the books. They have a couple of POV characters, and I thought it was great to sort of introduce Euron, and he was introduced like in the book. He's sort of even more crazy, but they gave a really good introduction and just how warped he is. Kate and I have read the books, but Dave, what did you think of the introduction to Euron? Because this is the first time you've really met this character.
Yeah, so he appears on the bridge, and you can tell after like a brief conversation that he's a little bit, not all there, let's say. And he keeps referring to himself as "I am the drowned god, I am the storm," and the whole part where he says he goes mad in a storm, and his crew tie him to the mast to keep him from like hurting himself and everyone else. When he's free, he just cuts everyone's tongues out.
Yep.
A ship's called Silence, which is,
That makes sense.
apt.
Yeah. And just the way he carries himself, he seems very cold. I mean, the Greyjoys are cold anyway, but he seems just completely just not there when it comes to violence and killing his brother.
Yeah.
What do we think about the implications for Yara? So we know that Yara is kind of more, peaceful now, I guess. She sort of realised that the Greyjoys don't have a good standing to get a foothold on the mainland, Kate.
I think Yara's going to have maybe a bit of a Sansa moment in that she's saying things and no one's listening to her. And she gets pushed to the back. They underestimate her because she's a woman. That happens a lot in Game of Thrones, so I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility. But, I'd like to see her get some power because she's badass and she's great in the books. She's almost as great in the TV series. But I think ultimately she's not going to get listened to.
What I thought was quite interesting, so in the books, Euron actually ends up going across to Essos. But it looks like from the trailers it'll actually be Yara, because there's one point where you can see her with a whore in Volantis because she's got like this tattoo. So it'd be quite interesting to see that if they kind of split those stories a little bit and just sort of swap the characters around a bit, which I think would be really cool.
That would be nice. Although, based on the books, I really hope it's more interesting. I hated the Greyjoy chapters so much.
I don't know. I just think they're an interesting sort of family. They have a very bizarre dynamic, and everyone's just vying for power all the time, and it's just they're just a little bit different.
And with the moot happening, and apparently Theon is heading back there,
Yeah.
the moot could be between Yara, Theon, and
And Euron.
And
Euron.
anyone else who wants to turn up.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
loads of Greyjoys out there.
that's the thing. I mean, we think we know the way that it's going to pan out, but as the show has proven so many times that
We know nothing.
we know absolutely nothing. Not to blow our own trumpets here, but we did pretty well with the predictions that we made last week. So we totally called that Ramsay was going to kill Roose.
Yep.
Totally called the Princess Bride resurrection.
Yeah.
And hey, mutton was key. And we totally called that, Tyrion and the dragons would play a part.
Yeah.
So we're doing pretty well. This week, I'm going to start off with Bastard Bowl, which I think is really exciting. So we know that Ramsay... actually, first, let's have a moment of silence for Roose Bolton. Rip. It's his own fault, really. He should have seen what Ramsay was capable of.
He's a traitor. I have no sympathy for that man.
So we know that Ramsay definitely wants to take on Castle Black. He wants to kill Jon Snow, and he thinks that he has all the northern armies in which to do so. So he's got the Umbers, the Karstarks, and the Mandaleys.
We don't need every house in the north. The Umbers, the Mandalists, and the Karstarks command more soldiers than all the other houses combined. With their support, none could challenge us.
So he's got a pretty sizable force, and as he says, at Castle Black, it's just rapists and murderers and petty thieves. They're not really trained. There's not very many of them.
And it's not defended from the south either.
Yeah, so he sees this as a pretty easy win. But he also doesn't know that Jon died and has been resurrected and is now kind of seen as this godlike figure from the wildlings. And also that he's managed to get the wildlings on side. And the wildlings, there's a lot of them.
And a giant.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and a giant. I'm guessing he definitely doesn't know about Wenwen the giant. So we also know that Sansa's on her way up there to reunite with Jon. So Jon, before, he's always been a man of honor, doesn't want to get involved, but now he has this personal connection. So he's going to want revenge on behalf of Sansa. So if we look at a book theory here. So when Lady Stoneheart was resurrected, it was Catelyn Stark, and she was kind of overcome with vengeance. So I'm interested to see if Jon will be different, if he won't be as honor-bound and peaceful as before, if he will be more Lord Stoneheart, let's just say.
Time to kick some ass, John.
Yeah, ass-kicking Jon. But also to do with Bastard Bowl, I think this line from the current Lord Karstark is quite interesting, and I think it leads into what's going to happen next week.
Your hold on the north will never be secure as long as a Stark can walk through that door.
And in the trailer for episode 3, we hear someone say, "I've brought you a gift." And right before that happens, that flag looks a lot like the Umber flag. And we know that Rickon was taken there. So basically, if Ramsay's gift, because when we were watching, we originally thought it'd be Reek, right?
Yeah.
Because
Reek's been captured and returned to him.
yeah, but really, all Ramsay needs is a Stark in the north. And if he's got Rickon,
The one everyone forgot about.
The worst of the Starks.
Well, Bran.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, so like he basically has everything. So he has everything he needs. Jon wants like revenge. Bastard Bowl. Get hype.
Snowball.
Snowball.
Battle of the Bastards.
Battle of the Bastards. There's so many. I mean, this show has so many bowls.
I do think as well, next episode is called Oathbreaker. And we are thinking that maybe the person breaking their oath is Jon Snow, because you only have to keep the Night's Watch oath until you die. And he died.
That's brilliant.
That's a great
I didn't
theory.
even think about that. No, because we
Shout out to
like
Kate.
when we originally went in, we thought it'd be like Brienne because her sword is obviously called Oathkeeper, but she's fulfilled her oath now.
Yeah.
She's found Sansa, so Kate Grey.
Excellent work.
It might finally be time for one of the biggest Game of Thrones fan theories to be confirmed. Kate, do you want to take this one?
Yes. Like Lucy says, it's the most exciting. It's R plus L equals J. The theory that Rhaegar and Lyanna had a baby. It was Jon Snow, and Ned adopted him and pretended he was just some bastard that he done did. We see Bran looking into Ned Stark's past in this episode, and we also see that it's going to happen in next episode. So in this episode, you see Ned at Winterfell training with his brother Benjen, and you see Lyanna for the first time, which is very exciting because we know that means she's going to be a part of these little green seeing trips that he's having. So next week, we see that Ned is standing outside some kind of tower fighting some guards. Could it be the Tower of Joy?
Well, they are Targaryen guards, and that guy.
Yep.
Can I shout out to that guy for his Ned Stark accent and impression? Because it is
love him.
spot on.
And now it begins.
Now it ends.
Yeah.
So for non-book readers like myself, what is the Tower of Joy?
So, the Tower of Joy is a tower built specifically by Rhaegar for Lyanna. He keeps her in there because he doesn't want anyone to touch her. So during Robert's rebellion, she is up in that tower doing God knows what. And when Ned actually enters her room, she's there in a bed of blood, as it's described in the books. And she dies in his arms with the words, "Promise me, Ned," on her lips. And we know that he sees winter roses, blue roses. Those are kind of Lyanna's symbol. Those are what Rhaegar gives her when he crowns her the Queen of Love and Beauty. So it's all very symbolic. But the R plus L equals J theory states that Lyanna's bed of blood is actually a child bed, having just given birth to Rhaegar's baby, i.e. Jon Snow. So this might finally be the moment when we find out what went on in that tower, whether Lyanna actually had a baby, what she died of exactly, and whether Jon is actually the blood of the dragon. And there's a little interesting side theory, might not be entirely true, and I'm not anywhere near as invested in this one, but Mira Reed is currently accompanying Bran in the north. She's very bored, as we see in this episode. Now, Mira's father is Howland Reed, who is currently MIA, but he is the only surviving person that was at the Tower of Joy that day. So there are theories as to whether Mira knows the tale, her dad told her the tale, and she'll somehow be key in helping Bran understand what went on. Or, even more interestingly, Mira is another R plus L baby, the twin sister of Jon, and they split the twin babies up, gave one to Ned, one to Howland. They went off, grew up, look kind of similar in that they both have dark curly hair. And, you know, I don't think that's probably not true because, so what? But there's another theory for you.
Kind of seems weird that people have been like sort of half ignoring Mira this whole time.
Yeah.
So I'm less convinced about that part, but I think that the her dad being there will definitely have repercussion, because I think this episode they're definitely seeding the fact that she's like, oh, well, I'm here, but there's no point in me being here. And the girl's like, no, you know, you must be there for Bran. I think that's good. Time for Death of the Week, and boy, do we have some contenders this week. Last week was pretty cut and dry. It was Trystane. He was the best death. This week, though, we each have our own nomination, so I'm going to start just the drunk flasher guy who the mountain just crushes his head like
A coconut.
like a. Well, that's pretty difficult to crush with just your fist, but I think the
Not
mountain.
for the mountain.
Well, the mountain could do it. I think when we were watching it, we all just sort of went, "Way!" when this death happened.
I like to think that the mountain did that, not for Cersei, but for Jaime, because that guy said Jaime was half an inch short of an inch. And the mountain's like, no, he's not. I've seen it, mate.
I think he might have just done it out of boredom. He was just there and he was like, I've not killed anyone today.
Yeah, I bet I would if I was that strong. My death of the week is one that wasn't actually on screen.
Could you say they actually died though?
Oh no, these guys died.
They died. It's Lady Walder and her unnamed newborn. It was a bit of a similar situation to Shireen in that you can hear them screaming for ages. I do hope that Ramsay gets what's coming to him though, because he is a bastard in every sense of the word.
Legitimized now though.
He is a legit bastard. My death of the week. We don't get to see too much of the awesome giants fighting, especially since 1-1 is the last one. But my death of the week goes to Mr. Trigger Happy Crossbowman on the ramparts of Castle Black. I don't quite know what he was thinking. This one crossbow bolt is just gonna is like a rose's thorn to this giant, and in return he gets made into a human paintbrush, grabbed with a limb, splattered against the wall, and just discarded. It's pretty badass.
Good grief. So there was a ton of food for thought in that episode. Personally, a really strong one for me. I really loved it. Lots of plots going on. Lots of good deaths as well. Lots of intrigue. Super excited for episode 3, Oathbreaker. Kate, what do you think?
I think this series so far is interesting. It's going a lot heavier on the big deaths than previous seasons did. They tended to save them up and do them all at once, like the Red Wedding. So I'm liking it so far. I hope they don't run out of people to kill.
That's the great thing about Game of Thrones is that we're excited when people die because we're awful like that. Dave?
I'm really excited. Like you said, they're setting up more stuff. It felt like episode 1 was where they got a lot of the setup out of the way. And then on episode 2, they kind of capitalized it. But also set up a few more things or just developed on current plot lines. But as we're seeing these plot lines like go on and seeing all these new characters get introduced and old characters get brutally murdered, it's all good stuff. All great Game of Thrones content.
Strong, a couple of episodes at the start of season 6. That's all we've got time for this week. Make sure to join us every Monday, youtube.com/GameSpot, or of course GameSpot.com, or on iTunes if you would prefer an audio version to listen on your commute into work or on your lunch break. Check it out at iTunes. You can find me on Twitter at LucyJamesGames. Kate?
I'm at How Not to Draw.
And Dave?
And I am at Irregular Dave.
And we'll see you next week.